Hey, welcome everybody. This is my first video of hopefully many, where I'm going to be doing a little tutorial for you with German cooking. What we're going to make today is Spätzle, a very common side dish found in Germany. This is something that literally translates into little sparrows. So without further ado, we're going to crack 2 eggs into a bowl. 1 potato, 2 potato. Now, for sanitation purposes, I'm going to throw the egg shells away and wash my hands real quick. Washing, washing, washing. Ah, there I am. Now we're going to whisk these eggs together. Now I'm using a fork, not a whisk, and there's a reason for that. We'll get to that in a little bit. But what we want to do right now is make sure that all of our egg whites are almost completely gone, as we don't want that to affect the color of our noodle. Now I'm pouring in 1 cup of all-purpose flour. And then I'm going to take about half a tablespoon of kosher salt and pour it right on top. And then we want to get a little bit of fresh ground pepper in there. Crack it right in. Cracking, 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 cracking. And hopefully you have some kind of pepper cracking device at your disposal. If not, you can find one at Aldi for about $1.29. And on top of that, I poured 1/4 cup of milk. Now, more traditionally, you would do something like water, but I just prefer milk. Optionally, you can also put in about about a teaspoon of nutmeg. It gives it a nice warmth to it, but again, not traditional. Now, where you're stirring this up with the fork as opposed to the whisk, as this will start to tighten up and get a lot of resistance to it, I don't want to bend up my wires. So here we are with the fork, scraping down the sides, scraping at the bottom, and making sure everything becomes well incorporated. Oh, look at that. We're fast forwarding. Enjoy the fast forward. Now what we want to see here is a nice plop. We want to make sure our dough or batter, whatever you want to call it, has this consistency, as we don't want it to break apart as soon as it goes into the water. We are making Spätzle, little sparrows, not yellow water. Now we're just going to give it a couple of final stirs, make sure everything's well incorporated and ready to go to our boiling water. We will do that momentarily, just enjoy me whisking. Ah, my pot of boiling water. My kitchen's not meant to impress anybody, but today what we're going to do is a couple of different techniques. If you don't have some of the more traditional Spätzle presses available, here's an option. You can always use a cheese grater and a spatula. What you're going to do is just put the batter right on top, or the dough if you will, and start rubbing it side to side. You don't want to go against the grain because that's going to destroy your utensil. Hold it about a couple inches, maybe 2 inches above the water, and just let it plop right in. And then as it hits, it's going to start to form that little sparrow. You want that water to be a good hot boil, violent boil if you will. But make sure that you're scraping it all in there. Don't let big old plops of it fall in because it's not going to cook evenly. Once you have that done, then you just sit there and you watch the grass grow. Nothing fun about that, so I've edited out quite a few minutes of footage. But essentially, you're going to let your little sparrows boil for roughly 3 to 5 minutes at a time, stirring it up occasionally, making sure it's not sticking to the bottom, and making sure you're going to get a good, even cook on it. Now we're just about at the point to pull them out, so what you want to do is scoop it. Give it a good shake, get all the excess water off. You don't want a wet noodle. The next technique we're going to do is going to be a Spätzle press, which is one of those ones that's more like a potato ricer. So we're going to get that. The cool thing is it's got this little ridge to where I can lay it right over top of my boiling water. And I can put it right in. You see that it's got the press at the top and the holes at the bottom. So what this one's going to be like is kind of giving us more of like a spaghetti noodle kind of shape, which is more traditional. That's a common one that you're going to find at most restaurants. Just a lot more of that easement, a little bit more of a fluid motion, and it's a lot less tedious than using something like the grater. Now, they do make the ones that have like press on top for the cheese grater type looking ones. I don't have one. I have a couple of different presses that I use. That doesn't happen to be one of them. But you're going to see quite a bit of a different noodle. It's still going to taste great. Scrape all the stuff off the bottom when you're done. And then just like the other one, let the grass grow. Boil it up. Now, one thing I do notice is when I use this attachment, or this Spätzle press, it does make my water boil up pretty high. Don't know why, can't put my finger on it. After about 3 to 5 minutes, your Spätzle is ready to be transferred into another container. Now I'm going to pull out my big boy press. This one was gifted to me from one of my friends in Hungary, and you'll see that here in just a minute. This one would be more ideal if I'm doing large batches using like triple recipe, 3 cups of flour, 6 eggs, etc., etc. There we go. Now that I've got all of it out so it won't stick to the bottom and burn, we're about to get my other press over here. There's the big boy. Now, the one thing that you're going to find with this is that when you get batter on top, you're going to have to constantly scrape down the top of the blades and the sides just to make sure you don't get a lot of it left in there. You'll see what I'm talking about here in a moment. I find this one the easiest to use, and it gives me a larger sparrow, just like it would with the cheese grater. Right here is where I'm going to have to scrape down what's on the blades, get that right back into the pot of boiling water. And then with this, because of the size of the holes, you're going to find that there's going to be some buildup at the bottom. So we want to scrape those off too, and that's going to give us mini sparrows. It's important to keep your eye on the stove while you're making it. You really don't want to walk away, and I'll tell you why. You've got to constantly stir the bottom. You've got to make sure that none of them have stuck. Eventually, after that 2 to 3 minute mark, they're going to start floating up to the top. But you still want to run whatever utensil you have along the bottom of the pan, making sure that none's stuck. At this point, I don't know where I was, but I can assure you that nothing's stuck. Looks like it's about time for me to transfer, so you're going to see the size of the noodles are going to be significantly larger than anything that we've done at this point. And these tend to drain off pretty fast. Now what we're going to be doing next, after we've transferred all of the Spätzle out of the water, we're going to grab a pan. We're going to start sauteing these in butter, and you're going to see how that you can do the Spätzle pretty easily at your own house with any of these kinds of things that you have. I would think that most people have a cheese grater, so it might be worth your time to try it once. Now what I've done is I've shook it up to make sure all of it's evenly coated with melted butter, and then I'm just going to let it sit there for probably about 2 to 3 minutes. We're going to close in on it. You see how the butter's starting to kind of like bubble a little bit. That's what we want. And as we're flipping it, probably after about 2 to 3 minutes, we're going to see that it's starting to take on some color. We don't want it to get too dark. We just want it to get a nice caramel on the outside on this size noodle. I think total time that you're going to spend at the stove is probably going to be about 8 to 10 minutes per batch. That way you have that nice crisp kind of snap to it when you bite into it. As you can see, I'm starting to close in on some of them that are starting to get to that nice caramel point. Now when we get to the larger noodle, that's going to be a little bit different, but we'll tackle that beast when we get there. Oh, I like how I zoomed in on that little brown spot. I think it's worth mentioning, because I don't believe I have at this point, that I'm sauteing the Spätzle on medium heat, not medium-high, just medium. Because I want to be able to control the heat at that point. I don't want it to burn up too fast, and me have a noodle that hasn't cooked all the way through, or got to that right consistency that I want, where it's got a little bit of a bite back. Now we're on to batch number 2, the one that's kind of like the spaghetti noodle. This reminds me of the kind of noodle that I got at one of the restaurants here locally, where the gentleman was from Westphalian, Rheinfeld. I probably said that wrong, but that's quite alright. Because at the end of the day, we both make delicious Spätzle. Now this one's a little bit different. It's a little bit more delicate because of the size of the noodle. So what I've done is just gently broke it up, and now I'm giving it kind of like light little flips. That way it's all coated, and then we rinse and repeat just like before. And this one's not going to take as long, and you really don't want it to get as colored because of the size of it. I think that would destroy the texture of it. We want it to have some of that softness, we want it to have some of that bite, we want it to have a little bit of chew. But this one, you really don't have to... Oh, what am I doing here? Closing up on that color. And I think that one didn't make it back into the bowl. That was me biting it, and it was delicious. Now at this point, what I'm doing is making sure that it's getting tossed around just a little bit so it doesn't stick to the bottom of the pan. Give it another couple of shakes, a little bit of a flip, and then it should be ready in no time. I just want to gently push down on the top, not smash down. This isn't a smash burger. I don't know if I can legally say smash burger, but you know what I mean. So we're almost to the point to where it's ready. We should be getting some good color on this by now. Again, we're probably right around here at the 6 to 8 minute mark. It's almost ready to transfer and get ready for my third one. The bigger sparrows. Yeah, I think at this point, yeah, that's me examining, me doing a taste test, because, you know, who doesn't want to eat their cooking? Make sure it's got the right texture. There we go, look at that. Ain't she pretty? Me giving a thumbs up, letting myself know that it's time to transfer. Give it one final shake, because I like to see that contrast of the, I guess, tanness of the noodle with the brownness, giving it a little bit of color. If I had some fresh parsley, I would toss in a little bit of fresh parsley, just to give it a little bit more liveliness of color. Oh, and here we go, transferring. And now I prepare for the last one. Ultimately, what I'm using is probably about a tablespoon of butter at a time, and that's all you really need when you're using a batch this size. Now this one is going to be a little bit different because I'm not going to have to flip it as much. Because of the size of this, you're just going to want to do like a long hard sear on one side, and that's all you're going to need. It's going to turn out kind of perfect. My preference is using the larger press like this so I can get larger noodles, or larger sparrows, if you will. I think my preference with that is I like to use it for kind of like meat dishes, Schweinebraten, or doing it with something like Bratenbull and putting a nice delicious cream-based sauce on top. If I was doing something like the traditional Kies Spätzle, I think I would do, oh yeah, look at that color. That's what I wanted. So that was probably about 8 minutes in. But I definitely want to use these for like a base as any kind of side dish. and put some kind of delicious cream sauce on top. But if I was doing that Keys Spätzle, I would use that kind of skinnier noodle, or I would use this thicker one from the bigger press. But that's for a later video, because there we're going to have to be caramelizing onions and shredding up Gruyere cheese and making a small little bechamel. But here are all the size differences at the end of it. That's my cheese grater. See how it's got this very distinct kind of shape from when it plops into the water. And then for my potato ricer Spätzle press, nice thin noodle. And then we all know what the big noodle looks like, so whatever way that we look at it, it's going to be a very delicious little pasta. And with that, I thank you for tuning in with me. I hope you've enjoyed this. Feel free to leave me any questions in the comments, and I'd be glad to answer as I can. Otherwise, guten Appetit.